All right, all right. What's up, everybody? I am back for yet another round of streaming reviews. I'm still reaching out to people to try to get some talks, debates, that sort of stuff. I wanted to host a debate on here, but it looks like that fell through. So we'll get some other content here at some point. But for now, we're going to continue looking at how other people discuss metaethics. And I got a juicy one today. This was a rough conversation to sit through. And it's a discussion between Andrew Wilson and Naima on the Whatever podcast. And it's a second conversation that they had, and they get right into metaethics from the beginning. All right, let's have a look. I didn't see exactly when I started, so I'll go with the first person. Modern Moralist, you get 1,000 Lance loot. Hey, Harmonica Luke, you get 500, and Normal Guy gets 250. Welcome, everybody. Modern Moralist, you got this theme going. I promise to make it weird by telling you how much I value you. Well, when you say that, you make it weird. All right. Grim Angel says, I just saw a video on this. What was going on in that video? So anyway, we'll get right into it. I think the conversation picks up right where I've started it. I've timestamped it for if you're watching this later and you want to go right to the original point in the video and watch it without my interruptions, you could go do that. So yeah, if you do leave a comment over there, I'm sure there's a million comments because it's a popular channel. It's probably got millions of subscribers, whatever. Be polite, don't be a jerk. I don't like people being jerks. There's no reason for that. Well, and I don't want to be responsible for it, if you do. So if you want to go be obnoxious, do it on your own time. Okay. Normal Guy says, my first ever Lance loot. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Then he says, oh God. Yeah, this is going to be a rough one. We'll see how far we get into it. I might have to leave in a bit. We'll see how much time I have today. Just a short clip, but is Andrew trying hard to hold her to agent relativism in order to counter her position that morality is inherent? All right. Is there a Lance Salute shop? No. I don't know if anybody noticed, I was wearing a Lance Independent shirt the other day. I don't know. It might be in the wash. Maybe I have it, but I don't know if people have seen it before. Oh, I showed one of my Lance Independent shirts before. If I ever get a big enough channel, maybe I'll have some merchandise, but we're not there yet. And then maybe there'll be a Lance Salute shop. It's not a bad idea, but I haven't been keeping track of it. So I don't know how much Lance Salute people have. I mean, I guess you could go back and watch every single video and find out. But yeah, it says you should rep the merch. Yeah, for what? My 2,000 subscribers and my 40 regular viewers? How many of you would buy a t-shirt? And what else should I have? I thought about mugs and stuff. I actually made t-shirt designs. I don't know if I've shared any, but I put some stuff like that's an empirical question. Words don't mean things. People mean things. I put by the way, gastronomic realism is true. It's kind of satirizing capturing Christianity with the by the way Christianity is true. It's by the way gastronomic realism is true. And what did I put? I put something stupid in the picture, like a person eating something disgusting. So I don't know. I have designs like that. They're all kind of minimalist designs. So yeah, I got t-shirt designs. You could stick those on a mug too. It'd be pretty easy to swappable merchandise because it's minimalist. You could really kind of stick it anywhere, and it goes with a lot of different colors. So I got the designs, but I don't think there's a market for it. Leftist point of view. Ooh, let's go. Yeah, and you've talked to Andrew, so yeah. Let's get into the discussion and see how they do here. Okay.
Play clips that'll show the lies about my positions.
I made one video about
you lied
that
a lot in the
specific
video.
moment.
You lied a lot about my positions. You said things like, this man wants to get rid of women's rights, and you said all sorts of things.
You said that.
No, I didn't.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Andrew, I just watched our debate back. Yes, the fuck you did.
Okay, tell me my positions in. What is force doctrine?
Force doctrine is that whole theory that might makes right. Essentially, It is more. Okay, then why don't you define your theory?
You have to listen, first, you can't criticize a position unless you can stably tell me what you think the position means before you criticize it. So what is it? What's force doctrine?
Your position is descriptive. So do you want to define your terms before we argue on whether or not?
Yeah, so he is accusing her of, he's saying she's lying about his positions. I think it's hard to impute intention. So I take lying to be intentionally saying things that you don't believe are true for the purposes of causing other people to have false beliefs, typically for some personal gain or something. There could be other reasons to lie. You could lie to protect somebody. There's all sorts of, there could be good or bad motivations for lying. If not lying, it could be confusion, misunderstanding. But in any case, one moment. The accusation amounts to she has not accurately described his views, whether she did so through intentional lying or not. And so he's like, all right, well, if you didn't do that, then tell me what my view is. And she's not doing that. If she understood his views and like he says, hey, what about this particular position I hold? Can you explain that? If she doesn't understand the view, a proper response would be to say, you know what, I don't really understand the view. Or maybe if I sat down and was writing about it, I'd be able to get it, but it's hard for me to articulate on the spot. In which case, I would wonder why she would agree to have a conversation if she's not good at addressing matters on her feet. But if she doesn't know the view, she should just say, I don't know the view. But instead, what you'll see here is that she makes a kind of, to me, it looks like a half-hearted attempt at offering an account. Apparently, it's not accurate. I don't know exactly what his view is on the matter, but let's just assume it's not accurate. That doesn't really depict her in a particularly good light. If he's saying you misrepresented or you lied about my views, and she said, no, I didn't. And he goes, okay, well, then tell me what my view is about this. And it's pretty central to his views. As you can't even get that right. She does not have a fluid conversational understanding of his perspective. And that's something that if she doesn't have, she should acknowledge. She should listen to him more carefully and try to get an understanding of his views. Doesn't matter whether you disagree with his views or hate his views or not, for the purposes of what I'm saying here. And just to say, look, there's a lot of politics in the background here. I'm not interested in that. I'm just interested in the metaethical portions of this, how well they are accounting for the metaethical considerations. This issue here isn't exactly metaethical, so it's like normative ethics, but it's relevant insofar as it sets the stage for the kind of meta discussion that they're having. You can see that there's context here. There's a back and forth. There's a concern that she's not accurately representing his views, and he's challenging her in that. And that's going to lead into a discussion about metaethics. And this is not starting well for her, unfortunately.
I know what you think force doctrine is because you're critical of it. How can you be critical of a position you can't define? Notice,
by the way, keep an eye on them. Other stuff you could notice. He's calm, he's collected, and you notice that she just rolled her eyes there. And I don't think it's a good look. I'll take it back and you could watch.
So do you want to define your terms before we argue on whether or not
I want to know what you think force doctrine is because you're
see the eye roll? He wants to know what she thinks the view is. If she's going to criticize a view, it's important to know what he takes the view to be. Why roll your eyes at that? Why be contemptuous or impatient or frustrated with someone that says, look, I don't think you've accurately represented my views. I mean, we could put it in his terms. He says, hey, look, I think you're lying about my views. If you're not lying about my views, then tell me what my view is. See if you could get it accurately. And she seems unwilling or unable to do so far. And I really find that frustrating. If you're going to agree to have a debate with somebody, prepare yourself. Don't go into a debate unprepared. It's frustrating to see.
Critical of it. How can you be critical of a position you can't define?
I mean, I think force doctrine is generally the belief that those who their rights.
No.
No?
No.
Okay, then explain it to me, Andrew.
Yeah, force doctrine.
Was there something clipped there? It sounds like it skipped. Did you hear that?
Force doctrine is generally the belief that those who their rights.
No.
Yeah. Something was clipped there. I don't know what that was. I don't know what happened there. Did you all see that? I don't know what that was. They edited it in some way. Maybe something happened.
No?
No.
Okay, then explain it to me, Andrew.
Yeah, force doctrine is the critical belief that rights come to women specifically from men, that women always have to appeal to men for the rights collectively.
Okay, so do you believe that anybody has like inherent rights? Are there any inherent human rights regardless of
Unless
strength?
you can ground them in God, I don't believe that you can ground rights in anything. And if you can, go ahead and do so.
Okay, so then based on your religion, what are the inherent rights that humans have?
Well, first, I need you to understand what the criticism is. So when I say to you, I don't believe that you can ground rights absent religion, do you agree that that's true or false?
I believe that that's false.
Okay, then can you ground rights for me absent religion?
Do you not know what rights are?
Yeah. It's a misstep on her part. So he's making a claim. I don't think the claim is particularly plausible. So basically the claim would be you can't ground rights without God. Now, I'd have concerns about whether you need to ground rights, what exactly that would mean. And that's not to say that he would necessarily have a defensible or indefensible position on this score, but on my view, rights would be a kind of social construction. There's something that we would collectively agree to. They don't need some sort of deep metaphysical grounding any more than like the rules of a sport would need some kind of grounding, whether in God or in secular, like non-theistic moral facts of. I just don't think you need any sort of, quote unquote grounding to say, hey, here's a set of rights I would like us to follow. Do you want to follow? Sure, cool. Let's make some laws. Let's enforce the laws. Now, in reality, things don't work out that way. Things are a lot messier, but I don't really think that you need to do what he's doing to have a functional moral system. Now, on the other hand, that's not what he's asking for. So he's not saying you can't have a functioning normative system in the absence of God. He's implying something about a metaethical consideration, that you can't achieve a certain sort of metaethical outcome without God. Now, I would actually agree. I don't think that you can, but that's because I don't think you can have you can't ground morality in the relevant sense with or without God. So there's a sort of trivial sense in which I agree, but it's agreement with a big asterisk. The bottom line here is, if you personally don't find any form of moral realism compelling, and someone says, do you think you could have moral realism without God? The answer should be no. You can't. Like, it's like maybe logically possible, but you don't think you in fact do have conditional on your views. You can't. I think a proper response, or a better response, would be to say, I don't think that you can have moral realism with God. I don't know exactly what kind of metaethical position Andrew would defend. Maybe he would defend some type of divine command theory that I wouldn't consider technically a type of moral realism, given how I use the term. And then the issue would have, the debate would have to shift to a different sort of discussion. It might even shift towards whether there is such a God. If someone ends up having a position where their conception of what it means for the moral norms to be grounded in an appropriate way just sort of tautologically requires a God, then the dispute should just shift towards whether there in fact is such a God. Now, there might be some caveats or qualifications in there. If they think that there's irreducibly normative considerations, I'm going to have issues with that. I don't think you could have that with or without a God, for reasons unrelated to the existence of God. So there's a lot of background stuff here that could be unpacked, but I don't think either of them at this point in the conversation are in a position to really do that. So let's just continue with the conversation. I'm making a lot of sort of preemptory commentary that I don't think is really helping. Nitty says, I didn't think Andrew was a rights realist. I'm not entirely sure what exactly his metaethical view is. So is he just baiting? Well, he's certainly challenging her, if you want to call that baiting. But look, if you thought somebody was not accurately representing your views, do you think it's inappropriate to challenge them on that? Like, you don't have to agree with him or like his overall perspective to understand why he would be doing this. Yeah, so Grim Angel says, I think it's hard to pin down since he says, unless you ground them in God, though. I agree. I don't think he holds rights to be real even with God. Yeah, I don't know exactly what his view is. So I've heard him say before that he doesn't think that they're like, he's made claims about rights that suggest that he does not think that they're like objective or stance independent. I don't know if he was being tongue-in-cheek or he was being unserious in the context of some specific conversation. Like, sometimes he seems like he's adopting a position for the sake of argument and seeing where that goes. So I don't know what his actual view on the matter is. See, I haven't done my homework on exactly what his views are on all these things, but I'm not claiming to know. So it's the kind of thing where I'd have to watch a bunch of his videos or watch the right kinds of videos or have a conversation with him to try to understand the views. Yeah, so this is a good point from Esmond. Why does it matter whether she personally can ground it or not? Even if she can't, that doesn't demonstrate that such grounding is impossible. That's true. But the question here is, if he says, do you think you could ground it? And she says, yes. Then I think it's appropriate to ask her, how would you ground it? And then if she's not able to answer, that's a problem for her view. Of course, if she can't defend the groundability of morality in the absence of God, that doesn't mean that it's not groundable. It could just mean that she doesn't understand how to do it. If a person can't defend a secular realist view, that doesn't make secular forms of realism wrong. It just means that person doesn't know how to defend them. But the question here is the defensibility of her point of view, not the position themselves. But it is a good point. And I do think it's a little obscure what exactly it means to ground something. And I think a good way to approach this conversation would be to ask him to clarify some of what he's asking her to do at this point. She seems unwilling or unable. You will see. I've already listened to this conversation, and she is very evasive and stubborn throughout this exchange. So it's not just a matter of being interrupted.
Can you ground them absent religion? Go ahead.
Grounding rights absent of religion. I mean, there's natural law. There's humanistic theories on law.
Well, I don't know which one you're going to go with, but go with one of them.
Okay, well, let's see. Which one would you prefer? We could do humanistic theory. We could do deontological ethics.
I literally don't give a shit. I just want you to ground rights outside of God.
Nick, you got to send me. Okay, continue, guys. Continue with the debate.
I guess, what do you mean ground rights? Do you?
Good. Maybe I said she isn't going to ask, but I think that's the right move here to ask for clarification about what he's asking for. So that's a good way to proceed. And as far as Mike commenting on she seems unwilling or unable and then said she was interrupted, he does interrupt people a lot. I don't think interruptions are always bad. I do think some of the times he interrupts people, it's reasonable, but I do think he interrupts people a lot. And I think I would find myself pretty frustrated with the frequency with which he interrupts people if he were to do so to me. And I didn't think it was warranted. I think it's hard to judge in any individual case. And to be fair, I'm not trying to take a side here. When I watched this, I was frustrated by her reactions because what I would like to see is people put up a better fight against Andrew on metaethical topics. So I think that he's challenging to deal with on the matter of metaethics. There might be quite a few ways in which you could criticize his general approach to conversations, but that's not really going to be my emphasis here. What I want to do is arm people or better prepare people or raise awareness about the difficulties of discussing metaethics. And if you're not able and ready to do so, find ways to get better prepared to have those conversations, or maybe you should avoid them and just say, yeah, I don't really know enough about this topic to engage effectively on it. So Bert says, Andrew Wilson does not make good faith. So any analysis would just be an analysis of rhetoric. There's still substantive content to discuss here, whether or not you think all of it is rhetoric, but I don't really see a problem with discussing rhetoric. So like, for instance, I commented on her rolling her eyes, which I think wasn't a great move to make at that point. So I think that you're already seeing a bit of a kind of impatience and frustration from her in this conversation. And, you know, if we're talking debate rhetoric, an important thing to do in a debate like this, especially when you're dealing with someone that you find very frustrating, I think I would find it tough to talk to him. Keep her cool, you know, don't let someone get you flustered. And if they do, it makes you look bad. It makes your side look bad. And you gotta keep a level head. And I don't always do that myself. I don't know how well I would do in a context like this. I might totally lose my cool, you know. So I'm not saying, oh, be like me, be chill in every conversation. I'm saying if you're having a frustrating conversation, it's good to be chill. I say that from the experience of completely failing to do that. Yeah, Tuff says, what the fuck? Deontological ethics is not metaethics, normative ethics. That's right. I don't think she has a good understanding of the distinction between metaethics and normative ethics. And I don't think it's super complicated to get a bit more experience or grounding in those distinctions. And that's what I would encourage her to do is just read a bit more metaethics and learn more about how to effectively engage on the topic. Bunch of letters and numbers. A lot of more realist argumentation seems to be backwards. The burden of proof is on the more realist to show that sense independent moral laws exist. They shift the burden on anti-realists. Yeah, so I don't have this strong view about anybody in particular having the burden of proof in virtue of the nature of the claim or the position or whatever. I think burdens of proof are something to be socially negotiated, and that there's no sort of objective or stance independent fact of the matter about who has or doesn't have the burden of proof. Burdens of proof are sort of a navigated conversationally and socially. All that being said, a lot of my work has been engineered towards rejecting the presumption realists make in favor of realism. So realists will go around basically saying The onus is on anti-realists to show that realism is wrong because we're justified in thinking things are the way they seem, and it seems like realism is true, and realism is the common sense view, and realism best characterizes the way ordinary people speak and think. And I think all of those claims are false. It might be the way realists are disposed to think, but I don't think there's good empirical evidence that ordinary people are realists or speak or think like realists. I don't think it's a better analysis of the way that people use language. I don't think that people's experiences generally comport with realism or are best explained by positing an implicit commitment to realism. I don't think most people would believe realism under counterfactual conditions in which you fully explained the relevant terms and concepts to them. So I just don't buy that there's any presumption in favor of realism. That's something realists say. I think it's not true. I don't think they've made good arguments that it's true. So I do agree with you. So on that component of like there being a presumption in its favor or them trying to burden shift onto anti-realists, I agree with you about that. But I wouldn't say, okay, so therefore the onus is on them as some sort of like objective characterization of the dialectic. What I would say is, look, they can shoulder the burden or not. If they don't, I don't think I have any obligation to grant a presumption in favor of realism. All right. Yeah. Jonah Viraj says, what dialectical work does Naima think simply listing rival meta-ethical views does for her? I don't know. I mean, if my guess is that she listed a couple things, but notice that she's like, well, which one do you want to go with? Does she endorse one in particular? If she doesn't, is she just like, it'd be weird for me to say, well, okay, to be fair, you could say, look, I don't endorse these views, but here's several ways you could ground morality without God. But she doesn't have to endorse one of them. But her response seems hedgy and equivocal, and like she's not really trying to say, oh, here's a way you could do it. Boom, boom, boom. That would like a firmer response instead of I've got some options and then shuffle around some papers. It makes it look like you're unprepared. It makes it look like you don't really have a firm position on the matter. It makes it look like maybe you don't really understand what's at stake in the debate. I'm not saying any of this is true, but I'm saying it is a bad look. And that's my concern here is, you know, obviously I'm not going to be on Andrew's side insofar as he's defending like if she's going to defend something like an anti-realist position, like go all in with that. But what she ends up doing is kind of shifting between what appears to be a realist and anti-realist view. And Andrew, I know, frequently is very critical of subjectivist and anti-realist views. I don't really know exactly what his own view is, but I've seen the way he's criticized people that have views that are closer to my own. And basically that means if I see someone that looks like they're maybe sort of in the ballpark of a view similar to my own, or maybe would be inclined towards that, it's frustrating when I see them not do a really good job of engaging on this. Yeah, so Grim Angel says the point of addressing rhetoric is to show that it's indeed rhetoric and not allowed to go uncontended and spoil the positions of people who don't have the tools to realize that it's rhetoric. That's fair. All right. Grim Angel says, can we drop some likes, chat, for this video? Great. Yeah, I would really appreciate that. That'd be awesome. She perceives his denial of any alternative grounding his ignorance of these systems existing. Maybe, and it might very well be that Andrew doesn't really know very much about secular attempts to ground rights or secular attempts to defend moral realism in a more general sense.
I mean, justify human rights?
I mean this. When I say ground rights, what are you appealing to? Let's just make it easy. What are you appealing to for rights?
Morality.
Okay.
That can either be morality through religion, or that can be morality through natural law. That can be morality through a social contract.
I'm not.
So I think there's a bit of inadequate communication going on here. I think that maybe Andrew wants to ask, what is the sort of meta-ethical grounding, or what is it that makes it true that you have rights? So there's no God. If you think you have rights, what is it that makes it true that you have those rights? Like what meta-ethically grounds the rights? I think he's probably asking something like that. But he's not being super clear. He could be a lot clearer about what exactly he's asking for. And then she's not understanding. Now, how much is that due to his lack of clarity? And how much is that due to her lack of knowledge of the topic? I really don't know. I wish there was a meta-ethicist here to adjudicate or assist in the dispute.
interested in all
That can be morality through creating an egalitarian society
not
that is
interested
functioning.
at all in possibilities. I'm interested in the one that you have.
These
So
aren't possible. I mean,
you tell me
any
what
and all of them.
Yeah. Okay. So now he's zooming in on it, because recall that I had said, like, maybe she's just listing some possibilities, and he's saying, no. I want to know what view you have. And I think it's fair to say, okay, no, I'm not asking you about what's possible. I'm asking you to defend your own view.
That can be morality through creating an egalitarian society that is functioning.
At all in possibilities. I'm interested in the one that you have.
These aren't possible. I mean,
can you tell me what
all of them.
I just want to know what you ground rights in.
I ground rights in morality. Rights are moral. It is just and moral to give people basic rights.
What do you ground?
And so then the question would be, why? Why is it just? What do you mean by that? There's meta-ethical questions to ask here.
Morality in.
Are you going to keep asking morality? Rights are moral. It is just and moral to give people basic rights.
What do you ground morality in?
Are you going to keep asking me, or are you
Yes.
going to actually make an opinion? This is what you do, Andrew. You
Yes, it
ask
is.
questions and questions and questions so
So
that you don't actually have to form an opinion
that's
and
great.
defend it.
That's great. So
Stop
what do you
using
ground,
descriptive arguments.
What do you ground
Make
morality
an opinion.
What do you ground
Do you
morality
believe
in?
that humans have
What do you
inherent
ground
value?
morality in?
Do you believe that humans have inherent
We
value?
can't go anywhere with the debate unless you can tell me what you ground morals in.
So do you exclusively ground morals in your belief in God?
I've already said 5 times yes. Now
Okay,
I need to
so
know what
if
you
God,
ground.
But hold on. Listen to me.
Okay, so he says he grounds morality in God. Now, I don't know if that makes him a realist or not. It looks like this question of grounding is maybe a bit orthogonal to the question of whether moral claims are stance independently true or not. So I'm still not entirely sure what philosophically is at stake here. It does look metaethical. You are seeing a lot of attempts. So it looks like he's trying to cross-examine her, to put her on the hot seat, to say, you defend your view. And right now it looks like she's trying to not do that. Now, I don't know enough about the conversational context to know whether it would be socially appropriate for her to try to say, no, I want to hear your view. I think this is the start of their conversation. So, but they've had previous conversations. So if it's the start of this conversation and it looks like he's established a certain kind of precedent for saying, okay, I'm going to examine your views on this, not my views. Play along with that, like do that. And then what I think would be a good response is to say, sure, okay, I'll tell you about how I ground morality without God. And then after I do that, I'd like to have you then ground morality with God. I'd like to hear more about your view. And I think if she proposed that, I would hope he would say, sure, okay. And then she gives her account and then he gives his account. Or maybe she gives her account, he examines it a bit, and then she says, okay, that's enough of that. I did answer your questions. I did play ball a bit. Let's put the ball back in your court. But it looks like she doesn't want the ball in her court at all. And it's hard for me to judge whether it's appropriate to say, no, there's no ball in my court. Let's put the ball in your court. I don't know. I don't know what you think in the chat, but I don't generally think if he's really pressing and saying, look, I want to know what your view is, just defend your view. And my worry here is that the reason she's trying to put the ball in his court is because she can't defend her view. Now, you could say, okay, well, maybe he couldn't defend his views. I don't know if he has in other videos or not. I don't really see a whole lot of people cross-examining him like themselves where they're really pressing him on his views. I don't know if he's just very good at not doing that and tries to avoid it or not. I'm not seeing, like here, I wouldn't see any evidence of that. The only person I'm seeing not wanting to answer questions is her. And so all else being equal, setting aside everything else, it's not a good look for her. So that would be my assessment so far. Yeah, this is right. So Jonah says, I don't think she understands what their disagreement is. I agree with you. I think he has a fairly clear understanding of what it is he's looking for, what kind of argument he wants to have, and what he takes the disagreement to be. And I think she does not understand. And that's why at this point in the conversation, I say this in spite of critiquing him and in spite of, I did a couple reviews where he's spoken to other people on the Whatever podcast. And I've said, no, I think they did quite well. I think that their positions are more defensible than he's giving credit for. I don't like when he mocks and ridicules people for having anti-realist views and says, oh, it's just, he says specific things about how it's just, feels good type morality. I think that's a bit of a caricature. And so there's plenty of critical remarks I could direct at him. But in this conversation, so far, I have more concerns with how she's behaving than how he is. And I don't say that because I want to criticize her. It's because I want people that go up against people with meta-ethical views I don't agree with to do a good job. If they're going to, I'd like the people with the meta-ethical views I disagree with to do a good job too. I want everybody to do a good job in meta-ethical discourse. And so really, I'm just trying to get to the root of where I have some concerns about how meta-ethics is being discussed here. Okay, anyway.
If God did not exist,
I'm not interested.
would there
until
be
you tell
zero
me,
morals?
Not interested until you tell me what you ground morality in. Tell me what you ground morality in.
I don't even understand why you're asking this question.
Okay, so
Where are you going with
you
it?
said, I asked you, do you believe that rights can be grounded outside of God? You said yes. So I'm asking what they're grounded in outside of God.
Social order.
What does that mean?
It means creating a society that functions. If no humans have rights, then you can't function as a society. Everyone would just be attacking each other all the time.
So you would have a society that functioned?
No, you would have an anarchic society if there is no social order.
What would make that unfunctional? It would be something.
I mean, no
that
one could
functioned in a way you
collaborate
didn't
with
like.
each other. Everyone would be constantly killing each other and maiming each other and raping
But
each
do you
other.
see how you're just making an appeal that morality just is preference based, just fits your preference?
It's not preference based. It's a necessity. It's a human necessity.
It's not necessary for you to have
rights are
rights.
necessary for survival. The right to life.
The right to life?
Yes, the right to life is necessary for survival.
You think that there's a right to life?
Yes.
It's super unclear what she's trying to say here. The right to life is necessary for survival. One, I just doubt that that's true. But two, it's not even clear what exactly she means here. The right to life. Is the right stance independently true? Is it true independent of some sort of intersubjective by people to enforce the right or not? What I'm getting at here is there'd be a difference between like a contractual agreement, like, hey, you and I have a contract where, like a work contract. I'm going to pay you and you're going to cut the grass or paint my house or something. There, like the agreement is one that we ourselves have constructed. And so you have a right to my pay if you paint my house, and I have a right to have my house painted if I paid you, to the extent that we've mutually agreed and are in social institutions which can enforce the right. That would be one way of construing a type of right. But would be another way, which is to say, regardless of whether you or I have agreed to anything, I have a right for you to not attack me or something like that. And it's not a matter of social agreement or subjective attitudes or preferences or values. I just have the right, and I have the right in virtue of something. So it could be that that right is endowed by God. Like God is the source of all rights, and in virtue of God's beneficence and so on and so forth, we have a certain set of rights, and God enforces those rights, and they are, so to speak, built into the fabric of the universe in virtue of God's existence. Or you could endorse like a non-naturalist account of realism, according to which there are certain sorts of moral facts about what people have rights to. Now, if you're a moral realist, you don't have to think that there's rights, but if you're a moral realist and you think that there are rights, you might think it stands independently true that we have a given right, and that in virtue of this right, we ought to act in certain ways and ought to abstain from acting in certain ways, and so on. And then, so if you're a non-naturalist, you could be a Platonist. You could endorse a really minimalist view where you don't think that there's a whole lot of metaphysical commitments that you're required to take on. So Parfit or Scanlon or somebody who might endorse a view like that. You could be a naturalist, realist, in which case you might think that, okay, well, there are moral facts, but they're not really these non-natural properties or entities that are inconsistent with the natural sciences. Actually, moral facts are consistent with the natural sciences, and you could be Railton or Boyd or a variety of other people that endorse a view like that. There's a variety. You could be a constructivist, and then are you a realist? Hard to say. I kind of think no, but sometimes it's hard to say. So if you're a constructivist, you might have a particular kind of view. If you're an ideal observer, you might have a particular kind of view. You might think that rights are grounded in what a fully informed and ideally rational agent would endorse under a certain, conceivable optimal conditions, or that there could be some other sort of constructivist procedure through which we could discover what the moral facts are. The moral facts would be in a certain way derivative of or dependent on our stances, but they wouldn't be it wouldn't be just whatever our preferences are, those are what the moral facts are. Rather, there would be some procedure about what we would consider the moral facts to be, given the application of or consideration of basically we use the procedure, and then the moral facts are whatever the output of that procedure is. And that procedure may inelimitably take on features of what our preferences or attitudes are. These are a bunch of ways that you could ground rights. And I think he's asking for something like that. And I think if you are aware of the positions out there and you think that there's a way to ground rights, in the absence of God, then you just offer that. And I just, you know, it doesn't sound like she has a good sense of how you might go about doing that. All right.
Of course, I believe there's a right to life.
Okay. And what do you ground that in?
I ground that in our ability to survive as a species. If nobody had a right to life, then what would stop Brian from just shooting up everyone in this room?
Force.
Our society could not function based solely on force.
Then how come societies?
We would all just be beating each other up all the time.
And how come societies right now do?
Societies don't exist solely on force. We have tons of other forms of power that exist in society.
Do you agree with me that there are societies which function purely on force?
Yeah, and they suck. Name a singular one that exists that is like fun to live in.
Do you see how now you're changing the goalpost? So
I'm not changing the goalpost. I'm trying to create a society.
Remember how we weren't talking about interruptions? Can I at least make the point?
You've interrupted me like 5 times since we started.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Well, so anyway, where you switched the goalpost here was you said that societies cannot exist. They can't exist absent rights. And my contention here is that they can. They can exist just via force.
Eventually,
hang on. Let me make the point. Let me make the point. They can exist absent rights. And you say that rights are necessary for societies to exist. Clearly, that's not true. I can point to you right now societies where they don't have rights.
Name a singular society where no human has any rights that exist.
North Korea. Anything you have that's a right comes from the state.
They still have a right to life. So.
No, there's no right to life. They take you out in the field and shoot you if you look at them cross-eyed.
Why don't you go live in North Korea?
Well, is that an argument?
Would you like to go live in North Korea, Andrew?
Is that an argument?
That's a weird thing for her to bring up. How is anything he's saying? How would saying, well, go live in North Korea? That's not an appropriate response. That doesn't get you anywhere. It just seems like a distraction tactic. Not to say that it's intentional, but that's not relevant. Grim Angel says, it might be the case that she might not be able to defend her view, but I think she might have come into this trying to show how Andrew doesn't defend his view. The thing is, he started the question train before her, likely because she wasn't sure how to start questioning him first or how to lead the conversation. Yes. If you're having a conversation and the other person is not taking direction in the conversation, it's natural to do that. That doesn't mean that it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing to potentially show a bit of grace and hand the topic over to them and try to guide them towards questioning you. But note the context in which he's coming into this. He thinks she's misrepresented his views and hasn't done so accurately. That's what he initially was challenging her on. And I don't think in that context, I would be disposed to be especially friendly to a person and say, you know, here's the ball. Sir, please serve the ball and I'll respond. I think I would challenge them. I think I would do the same thing if I thought that they were doing that. Look, we could evaluate their motives and intentions all we like. The bottom line is he's questioning her and her answers are not good. They're displaying all the hallmarks of a person that is floundering and fumbling and doesn't really know what they're being asked and they're in over their head and don't have a good handle on the topic. And so they're grasping and flailing around for something to grip onto to try to get some kind of handle on the conversation. And I think she's not succeeding at doing so. Yeah, exactly. So I am says, oh boy, this isn't going well. It's not.
Are you arguing in favor of North Korea? You think the North Korean government structure?
He is not arguing in favor of North Korea.
Is fun? A vibe? Like, why would anyone want to go there?
What does that have to do with anything I just said?
Because it's not a sustainable society.
Okay, but
it's a society that perpetuates human
let's
suffering
try this again.
Because no one has any free will.
I know that.
Why don't you
so
make
as we're doing the obfuscation here, I just want to point this out. I asked you how you ground rights. You said rights exist absent preference, and I said okay, if they exist absent preference, how come I can point? Yeah, well, you said you have to have rights for there to even be a society. I can point to a society where humans have no rights, and clearly that's a society. So I don't understand how it is that you think that you can't have societies which exist without rights, and you still haven't given me accounting for where rights come from. And so it's critical. I gave you my opinion about force doctrine. I told you what I think about rights.
So do you?
Hang on. And so I told you what I think about rights. Right now, we're just.
Yeah, there I would be a little frustrated. So she kind of reacted because he goes, "Hang on." It sounds like he's setting her up for her to jump into the conversation. And then he's like, nope, there's more, which is fine. Maybe it looks like he's prepared to say more. So there's a little bit of potential miscommunication there. I think that they handled it well. He decided to move on. She found it mildly frustrating. Okay, so this is something I do agree with. And this is something that I wanted to say about the video. Jonah says, Andrew could could do a better job equipping her with the relevant metaethical concepts, but I suspect the reason he doesn't is that he doesn't have much of a firmer grasp of them than she does. That might be true. I also think that in this conversation, there is possibly a degree of antagonism or hostility. They're mostly being polite with each other, but I don't think he particularly likes her or her worldview. So I don't think that he feels he's in a position. He's not in like a pedagogical context. This is not like an instructor talking to a student. So this isn't a context where you might say, okay, look, it doesn't sound like you're getting what I'm asking you. And maybe I'm bad at asking, maybe you're not understanding, who knows? But here's what I'm asking. And you could then say something like, typically, if you're not grounding morality in God, here are the way, like what I was doing earlier. Here are some options on the table. Do you endorse one of those? And you could try to walk a person through and try to figure out whether they have sympathies to one of those views. I don't see him doing that. And I don't think you're obligated to do that. I do think that'd be a good way to approach this. So if I were talking to someone and it looked like they weren't understanding what I was putting down, I would hope that I would say, okay, here's what I'm trying to get at. And here are the typical options, A, B, and C. Do you find one of those appealing, or do you have an issue with all of those? Maybe we could explore some other possibility. That I think would be a productive way to pursue the discussion. Here, it's a little more, if not like genuinely in terms of their actual attitudes, but in terms of the conversational context itself, is a bit more combative and antagonistic than that. It's more, it's not a pedagogical context. So yeah, I do agree. And it might be, I do agree with you, Jonah. And I do think that it may very well be that Andrew doesn't have a good understanding of the relevant metaethical distinctions. It would be, is he a metaethicist? Like, it's not the sort of thing I would typically expect of people. Not to say that he needs to be, because anybody could enter these conversations and be well aware, but I don't generally operate under the assumption that people like have a really comprehensive understanding of the options available. Yeah, Eskimo is a good point. I don't agree that it's saying North Korea have zero rights either. I don't think that's true. I don't think I have zero rights. Joseph Romano says, I think she just came out trying to clip farm, just my opinion. I don't know who said this, but I recall someone accusing her of that at some point. Just my opinion. Only evidence I have is her constant reframing. So you're saying at a point where she says something stops and says, wait, cut that. Yeah, wait, cut. But if somebody said something really outrageous, I might say, clip that. I've commented on that before. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what my motives are. So it's very, very difficult to know what a person's motives are. Very, very difficult. Okay, let's keep going.
Clarifying the language so you can't do the fallacy of equivocation. I don't want you to move between separate definitions of a word using vagueness, which is fallacious, so fallacious debate move. I want you instead to be very clear on what rights are, what you ground them in, where they come from, and that's what we're debating about if we're talking about rights. So please do so.
We're not debating about that. We're debating about force doctrine and the morality of force doctrine. Do you believe that force doctrine is moral? Do you believe that it is moral to take rights away from people on the basis of force?
This is pure obfuscation.
Do you believe in coercive power?
This is pure obfuscation.
I do think it's fair for you to answer his
question.
It
is.
I think, honestly, Andrew, my issue with where you're going in this debate. I don't care about anything
you're about to say. Just want to know
if
where
you don't care
rights
about
come
anything
from.
that I'm about to say, then why should I bother to
Where do
speak?
rights come from?
I believe that humans have natural rights. I believe that humans
okay,
have
natural rights.
Yes.
Okay, so natural right theory is what Nala believe, or I'm sorry, not Nala. What is it? Naima. Sorry, natural rights. Okay, and
I don't think that they have to be ordained by God. I believe that everyone has an inherent set of rights.
They're inherent.
Everyone has an inherent set of rights. So the language there sounds like realism, but we'll see where this goes.
Yes, natural, inherent, these are synonyms.
So where do they come from?
They come from our existence. What do you mean? It's a right. It's not a physical thing. Like, you get that.
Okay, they come from our existence. It's a right. It's not a physical thing. It's getting us somewhere. Yeah, Genesis, how is vagueness, especially as a product of poor understanding, fallacious? It's not. I don't think he was saying, was he saying you're equivocating, or was he saying I want to be clear on the terminology? Because it seems like she's not, it seems like he's saying, look, I want to be clear on what you mean by this so that you won't equivocate. Yeah, Nitty says imprecise language makes it easy to equivocate. It does. It does. So I think it's reasonable to say, look, I want you to be clear about what you mean by this so that you won't equivocate. Now, someone might take that to be implying that you are going to equivocate, or that you're not debating in good faith, or you're not going to debate prior to you even doing so. Kind of like if I said, hey, you know, keep your hands above the table so you don't, I know you're not going to steal from me. I'm already implying distrust, and like you might be disposed to steal from me. So you could object to somebody saying that, but I think generally speaking, a request for clarity in a conversation like this is completely reasonable.
Right?
No. Can you explain it for me?
No. Well, the right to life, life comes from being alive. So what do you mean? Where does it come from? Where does life come from?
No.
Well, life comes from when a man and a woman are in love and they hold hands for a very long time. They can.
Yeah, it seems like a kind of a glib response from her. That's not really addressing what he's asking for.
Make a baby. That's where life comes from.
So these natural rights that you claim that we have, which are inherent, if they're inherent, does that mean that everybody has them?
Yes, I believe everyone has them, but they can be infringed upon, and that is immoral.
I see.
That is the definition, of, in my opinion, of morality, is infringing on one's natural rights.
So you're born with rights?
Yes.
So they're not social constructs that we make up? They exist outside of that?
That really sounds like he's saying, are they stance independent? Are they true independent of social construction or collective agreement or whatever? It sounds very clearly like a metaethical question to me.
Well, I mean, it's not a physical thing.
Oh, it's not. Well, I'll tell you a couple of terms: objective and then subjective. Objective means that it does not depend on a mind. An example.
Now look at that. I was criticizing Andrew for not giving her options earlier, and here he actually is doing that. He actually is saying, look, here's some options for you. Objective, subjective, here's some options for you. I'll explain it. So look, I'll just concede. I have a natural bias towards wanting to be super critical of Andrew. And I'm trying, maybe I'm trying too hard to be fair here, but what's wrong with what he's doing there? Now, you could argue, well, he should have done it sooner. How often do you see people in debates be like really try to lay positions out for other people? Not that often. People are often quite ruthless in debates. So I don't think he should be held to a much higher standard than other people. And again, if we wanted to, we could analyze this in terms of whether he's being, you could say he's being too pushy or domineering in trying to control the course of the conversation. You could maybe level some criticisms at him. But the bottom line is, I want people that are going to argue about metaethics to be well prepared to do so. And that's why I'm focusing a lot on her. All right. Andrew Moy says, I was worried that asking for grounding, it seems weird to ask where something comes from if it's inherent. Yeah, well, where it comes from, it might not be a clear question, but asking whether it's objective or subjective, I think is a better question, or asking whether it's socially constructed or depends on the agreement of communities or individuals coming together or something like that. Those are better questions. So yeah, I don't think he's asking perfect questions here. I do think that the way in which he addresses the topic could certainly be improved for clarity and rigor and precision in what he's asking for. I don't think he's asking and pitching and framing and setting things up in the optimal way. Far from it. I think he could do quite a bit better at setting it up. But it's not like a disaster. It's not like it's completely incomprehensible what he's asking for. I do think it's a little vague. And I think a proper response is something that she's done a bit of, which is to say, okay, well, what do you mean by grounding? So I think that she should be doing more questions. She should be asking more questions about what do you mean about this? What are you asking for in this case? If I wasn't sure what someone was asking for, I would hope that what I would try to do is get clear on what they're asking for. And I think she's jumping the gun a little too quickly and trying to give answers without really doing the work to try to understand what he's asking for. And again, it's an open question. How much is due to his lack of clarity and how much is due to her being too presumptuous and thinking that she does understand, or, you know, whatever other sorts of potential errors she might be making in responding. Andrew Moy continues. Andrew Moy, I'm going to keep saying Moy because we're reviewing a video about Andrew Wilson. I don't want to mix up which Andrew we're talking about. We don't want to equivocate. I'm not sure that's equivocation. It's not using this. Well, it's using the same word to refer to different people, but is that using the same word to have different meanings? In a way, kind of. Anyway, Andrew Moy says, very uncharitably, I worry when Wilson is asking for grounding, he's not going to be satisfied with any answer that doesn't lead to God. That might be, but we don't know. So I don't know what would happen if Andrew Wilson talked to, say, Mike Huemer. Mike Huemer may not. Mike Huemer is going to be able to answer these questions. I'll put it that way. And it's not clear to me that Andrew would go, would not be satisfied. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball.
Is that tree out there would exist if there was no
Andrew, I know what objective and subjective means.
Then tell me what subjective means.
Subjective is
okay. She says she knows what they mean. I think it's reasonable for him to ask. So
subjective means that it does not depend on a mind. An example is that tree out there would exist if there was no
Andrew, I know what objective and subjective means.
Then tell me what subjective means.
Subjective is something that is malleable. It can change. It's not a fact.
Oof. No. In this context, that is not what subjective means. So she says, malleable, it could change, it's not a fact. Let's get exactly what she said.
An example is that tree out there would exist if there was no
Andrew, I know what objective and subjective means.
Then tell me what subjective.
Now, notice the tone. Andrew, I know what objective and subjective mean. This is kind of like, come on, I know what these mean. That's expressing a type of a degree of confidence. Look, I know what you mean by this. Come on now. And then she immediately face plants and gets it completely wrong. Look at the response.
Subjective means.
Subjective is something that is malleable. It can change. It's not a fact.
No.
Yeah.
It's malleable. It can change. It's not a fact. That is not what subjective means in this context. So subjective in this context would mean something like made true by our preferences, something like that, or true relative to the standards of individuals. It's not a good answer. Metaphysics says saying I know what they mean is strange when they are such slippery terms. I agree. So in this context, that's what I would take it to mean. If he said no, at that point, I would argue with him. I'd say, look, in this context, it sounds like you're drawing a distinction between whether or not claims like I have a right to X, like I have a right to life or whatever. Let's go with that example. I have a right to life. What is it that makes that claim true? Is it some stance independent fact? It's a fact, whatever grounds it, it's not our stances. So it could be God. You could argue it's actually grounded in God's stance. Could be God, could be, some non-natural set of facts. It could be some natural facts, something like that. Let's just grant that there's some realist conceptions that are not stance dependent that are grounded in God. So God, non-natural facts, natural facts, whatever they might be. Or you could say it's grounded in attitudes or preferences, whether they be of individuals or groups. So subjective would be pushing towards the latter cluster of conceptions, something close to stance dependence, something like that. Now, if he said that's not what subjective means, then I would say, okay, look, in this context, that would be a very reasonable interpretation of what you mean by that. So if you don't mean that, then we've got a problem. And then we could just clarify, and maybe he would mean something else. Now, if he is going to turn around and give a weird definition of subjective, then I'll just think that they're both wrong. So let's see what he says. Jonah says, I'm sure she felt patronized by Andrew's explanation, but woof, she should have just listened. Right. She gave a terrible response. That's not even a conventional understanding of subjective. Malleable, subject to change. That's not what subjective means in metaethical context. It's not even typically what it means in colloquial context. That's a very strange and poor response.
Objective, no. Philosophical subjectivity just means depends on a mind.
Okay, so that's
it's a pretty good answer. So mind dependent was the terminology that was common in the 90s, and it's still fairly common. Like Huemer says, observer independent. People will sometimes use other sorts of terms. These days, there's been a shift towards stance dependent or independent in a lot of the contemporary metaethics discourse. A lot of that can be attributed to Rush Schaefer Landau, but other people use the term. His answer is basically what I said. Stance dependence, mind dependence would be functionally synonymous in this context. Sometimes the term mind independence or dependence is used a little differently, but that's not really relevant for the purpose of this conversation. You know what? It might be, but we'll see. But that's a pretty decent response.
exactly what I just said.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
So anyway, back.
Okay, so then we got a problem there. She says that's exactly what I said. Dependent on minds is not the same thing as malleable or capable of changing, or what did she say? Not a fact or something? Let's write it down.
Well, I mean, it's not a physical thing.
Oh, it's not. Well, I'll tell you a couple of terms: objective and then subjective. Objective means that it does not depend on a mind. An example.
Wow. Okay, so he said objective is subjective. Objective means it does not depend on a mind. So he actually, I didn't notice this earlier. He already gave her a definition, and that tees up what the definition of subjective should be on his use of the terms when she responds. So if I say, look, we've got a couple terms, objective and subjective. It should be clear from the context that those are contrasting positions. And if someone then says objective means it does depend on or it does not depend on a mind, the natural reaction should be, oh, so by subjective you mean it does depend on a mind. Right? So it does not depend on a mind. The emphasis is on not there. So if it's contrasting the two positions, you would take the other position to be a negation of that. So it doesn't look like she picked up on that. And notice, I didn't pick up on it. I didn't notice that. So he actually gave her the definition.
Is that tree out there would exist if there was no.
Andrew, I know what objective and subjective means.
Then tell me what subjective means.
Subjective is something that is malleable. It can change.
Subjective is something that is malleable. It can change.
It's not a fact.
No.
It's not a fact. So typically, subjectivism in metaethics is taken to be a cognitivist position. So it's a position according to which moral propositions can be true or false. And what makes them true are the standards, attitudes, or preferences of individuals. They would be true. It wouldn't be the view that the morals are not a fact, or that there aren't facts about what's morally right or wrong. Also, that something is malleable or can change doesn't mean that there aren't facts about it. You know, Play-Doh is malleable. It doesn't mean that if I shape it into a square, it's not a square, and I shape it into a circle, it's not a circle. Changeability isn't somehow inconsistent with there being facts. So this is a very poor definition, and you're going to see she makes a mistake of just insisting that this is the same as what he said, and it's not.
Objective, no. Philosophical subjectivity just means depends on a mind.
Okay, so that's exactly what I just said.
No, it's not.
It's not exactly what you just said. It's completely different.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to this though. I was trying to give you the example so I could clarify the position. I want to try to have a good faith debate. Yes, I don't know why you refuse to clarify your positions for me.
I just clarified my position.
Okay, so
now clarify.
So is it so are rights subjective?
I believe rights are subjective across society.
Then how can they be inherent?
I believe.
Yeah, it's a good question. If they're inherent, how can they be subjective? But it's really going to turn on what she means by inherent. If I was him, I would have asked, what do you mean by inherent? Maybe he already did ask, I don't know, but that would be the natural question. And what I would ask is, does rights being inherent entail that they are not the fact that we have them doesn't depend on our minds. It's not made true by our preferences or attitudes. That's what I would want to get clear on. So she says, yes, the fact that we have rights, we have them independent of whether or not we prefer to have them or desire to have them or agree that we are going to act as though we have them or whatever. If they're not made true by our attitudes or preferences, that they are stance or mind independent. And then I'd ask, okay, so do you think morality is mind dependent or subjective? And if the answer to that is yes, yeah, you got a contradiction there. Although technically you could think like evaluative facts are mind dependent, but like rights are mind independent. There's some weird views you could have where those are consistent, but it would look to me like it would be very close to having identified a contradiction. And if you wanted to be real precise with the language, you could try to expose a contradiction. And I think that's generally a good way of showing that people don't have a clear understanding of what they're talking about, as you just Socratically lead them into a contradiction. Yeah. Yeah, it's really not. And, you know, what she should do at that point, or I don't want to tell people what they should do. What I would advise at this point myself is, if someone just revealed that you didn't understand what they were talking about or misunderstood the concept, I wouldn't try to insist that I said the same thing. You know, if you botched a definition or gave a very different definition, I wouldn't say, nope, it's the same thing. And then when they're like, no, it's not, it's just roll my eyes at them. I wouldn't do that. She should be able to recognize that those are very different things. And if she doesn't understand what he means by mind dependent, she should be able to ask at that point. Now, if he was unwilling or unable to answer, that would be a problem on his part. But I didn't see her ask yet.
That certain rights are inherent and certain are subjective.
Okay, so how? So
oh, okay, whoa. So now we get a hybrid position. Certain ones are subjective and certain ones are inherent. That implies that the ones that are inherent are not subjective. So when he asked if she thinks rights are subjective, why would she say yes, they're subjective? Why not say some of them are subjective, but some of them are not? This looks like she's trying to avoid getting pinned down. It doesn't really have a very well developed view here.
I mean, there's no
So is it so are rights subjective?
I believe rights are subjective across society.
Then how can they be
I believe rights are subjective across societies. There's no qualification here at this point. She hasn't said, I think some of them are subjective. But I don't know what she means by rights are subjective across societies. I don't know what that means.
inherent?
I believe that certain rights are inherent and certain are subjective.
Okay, so how? So
I mean, there's no limit on how many rights a human can have.
Which inherent rights are objective?
Which inherent rights are objective? I think that the right to life is objective.
Okay, so then.
Okay, so she says, I think the right to life is objective. So is she a realist then? It sounds like it. That sounds like realism. Because, hey, at least one right stands independently true.
And if it's objective and it does not depend on human minds, where can we find it?
We can find it in being alive. What the fuck are you talking about?
Where can you?
Yeah, where can we find it is a bit of a, it's not a question I would like very much. One doesn't have to think that if you have a right that it has to be like spatially located.
You find the right to life.
Like, let's say I think it's a fact that carbon atoms have 6 protons in them. And then someone says, well, where is that fact spatially located? The fact isn't spatially located anywhere. It's an abstraction predicated on some sort of inductive inference I make about observing the behavior of a lot of carbon atoms or something. Maybe that's not the best example, but you could say it's a fact that 2 + 2 = 4. If someone said, where is the force located? Like, where is the 4? I think it would be kind of a silly question. So I'm not sure that's a good question that he asked.
If absent the grounding in meaning all depend on human minds, where can we find it?
We can find it in being alive. What the fuck are you talking about?
Where can you find the right to life absent the grounding in meaning all minds are gone? Remember, I told you objective means you don't need any human minds. I tried to explain this to you a second ago. Now you just walked into a horrible trap. Objective means does not depend on a mind. What you said just got done telling me is that you have an inherent right to life and it's objective. That would mean that that right does not require human minds. So you should be able to point to where it is. Where is it?
That's a weird question. Where is it? It doesn't have to be anywhere. What exactly is he asking at this point? If he were asking for what sort of meta-ethical position do you hold that can justify believing that, that would be one thing. But where seems to imply that it's got to be some kind of natural fact that is spatially located. That's what that sounds like to me. And that sounds weird. You don't have to think that if there are facts that they're spatially located. So I don't know what really he's asking for. Jenna says, maybe she means that some social entitlements that are commonly referred to as rights are socially constructed, but some rights are indeed inherent. Yeah, and that would seem to make her a realist, because realists don't have to disagree that we could have like social agreements that are malleable and subject to change, but that some things aren't subject to change. You could certainly think, look, there's a core set of rules that ought to govern all societies. They're true independent of whether anybody agrees to them. Like, I don't know, you can't own slaves or something like that. But then like what side of the road we drive on, or how exactly we handle resource allocation following a person's death, like inheritance law, that's malleable. So that's subjective. It's subject to change. It's up to us. But that, like, whether people have a right to like liberty, that's not subject to change. And that would be a pretty conventional position I think a lot of people would have. So if she's saying that, she's expressing a pretty common view. And then I'd say it sounds like she's a realist of some kind. It's hard to say.
Andrew, rights are not physical, though. Not everything that is objective is physical.
I think she's right here. Not everything that's objective is physical. And I don't even think that makes you necessarily a non-physicalist. Because you could think that there are, well, I don't know. It really depends exactly on what you mean by that. It's like, is the center of gravity physical? You could say yes, but then someone could say, well, you could point to where centers of gravity are. I don't think it matters that much for our purposes. What I would say is they're not spatially located. You could say that they're not physical, and I think that that's fine. She doesn't have to be a physicalist either. So I think it's a reasonable response. Yeah, they're not physical.
Okay, then what is everything that's objective if it's not physical?
Well, you just defined it.
What?
You just defined
what are you talking about? An objective means it requires or does not require human minds.
Honestly, this is getting annoying.
Philosophical objectivity requires minds. Put that in.
No, don't put requires minds. Just put definition.
I'll do it for both of you.
Thank you.
So
yeah, so I think it's reasonable to say, look, I think that there are moral facts, but they're not physical. Now, you could be some type of, I don't know what her position is. I don't know if she's a physicalist or not. If she were a physicalist, then I would have some questions about that. I would start, because that stuck out to me. Because if you're a physicalist, you're not necessarily going to say that everything that exists is an object, because one could say that things exist, but they are the descriptions of the interactions of objects. They're not things themselves. So, if a person's talking, I can't like show you a piece of talking. Talking is a thing that physical things do. And so you have to be careful with physicalism, not to be a thingist, where all nouns refer to physical objects or things in the world. You don't have to think that. Like, you don't have to think anger is a physical object. You could just think that anger is something that is instantiated in or manifests through a particular patterns or interactions of physical things. So that would be hard to say in the context of a conversation if you're not prepared to do so, to defend some sort of physicalist view. You're like, look, I'm not saying I'm not a physicalist, but these aren't something I could point to in space. There's lots of things as a physicalist I think that there are, but I can't point to them. I can't point to a piece of justice, but I could say here, I could describe an event which I think justice was carried out. You could do that as a physicalist. That's not really a problem. But I do think his question is a weird question. Them looking it up, I really hope they don't go to dictionary definitions, because that's not a good place to get a good description of terms and concepts as they're used in philosophy. JH says she doesn't have a meta-ethical view as she doesn't study philosophy. That was my impression of this debate when I watched it last time. That seems right. It's unclear what position, if any, she has. Zachman says, hey, glad I'm here on a stream. Yeah, welcome, welcome. I'm probably going to be ending this one pretty soon, but let's see where things go here.
Objectivity, the quality of being objective. Here,
Thank you, Merriam-Webster.
Yeah.
You have to put philosophical objectivity requires minds.
Okay.
That way we can clarify
Let's just do a basic definition of objectivity and work off of that.
So objective, not influenced by personal feelings or opinions.
That's a different conception of objective. That's not the conception at play in discussions about metaethics.
Considering and representing facts.
Thank you.
Yeah, but
Stands to Reason says, at 1955, Andrew subtly changed the claim. Did anyone else catch that? No, I don't think I did. What was the claim change that occurred? So while you're telling me what that is, and we might have to go back and have a look at that, let's go back to this awkward attempt at defining things. Whoop.
You have to put philosophical objectivity requires minds.
Okay.
That way we can clarify it.
Let's just do a basic definition of objectivity and work off of that.
So objective, not influenced by personal feelings or opinions, in
Wrong
considering
definition.
and representing facts.
Thank you. All facts are material, Andrew.
Which ones?
I mean, air exists. And
is air material?
Actually, yeah, air is material. Okay, yeah, air is material.
No. Oh. I think I would wave the white flag if I understand where she's coming from, like why you could make that mistake. But if and it's the kind of thing I could see myself doing. It's not physical. Well, it is. I would wave the white flag. I could totally see myself saying that about air. Oof. Yikes. But it would still be really embarrassing.
I'll give you that one. Oh, God.
God.
Oh, God.
Okay.
I don't think she'll laugh that hard. So I kind of share her reaction like, oh, God. You're getting a little too excited there. Oh, that was fun. I want to watch that again. Nah, let's keep going.
So we have inherent rights that aren't material, but they're objective.
Andrew, there are immaterial facts. Do you genuinely not believe that?
What?
I mean, thoughts. Like humans have thoughts. Thoughts are not material, but they are a fact.
Do thoughts come from something material?
Yeah. So if you're a physicalist, you're going to say that like thoughts ultimately what they are, like depending on the type of physicalist you are. But you could say something like thoughts are reducible to brain states, and so they're physical. And you could say, rights are reducible to certain sorts of physically instantiated events that could occur or be manifested or something like that. I mean, it'd be a little hard to cash it out, but I think you could pull it off. But it doesn't sound like she's a physicalist from that description.
But a thought is not material. Do you believe that a thought is material?
How do you know?
When you have thoughts, does steam rise out of your fucking head?
How do you know a thought's not material?
Well, why would steam have to rise out of your head? Stuff is going on in your brain. There's brain activity, neurochemical transmission. I'm not even a physicalist, but like a physicalist is not going to have trouble dealing with, not too much trouble dealing with thoughts. They might have trouble dealing with phenomenal consciousness, but certain aspects of what brains do, I don't think are going to be a big problem. Maybe they would be. Whatever. I don't really want to get into a dispute about that.
How do you know thoughts are?
Well, the thing is
what thought that you've had is material.
You would ground a thought in a brain, right?
Yeah, but a brain and a thought are two different things.
So you would agree with me that if there was no more brains, there would be no more thoughts.
Well, your brain creates thoughts.
So without,
but a thought is immaterial. Are you really trying to argue?
So the thought is immaterial. Yeah, it doesn't sound like she's a physicalist. It sounds like maybe she's like a property dualist or something. Maybe a substance dualist. I don't know. The brain creates the thought. Does substance dualists think that? I don't think so. I don't actually know what substance dualists think about the exact relation between brains and minds. I should get one on the channel like David Paulman to talk about it. Should we do that? Get him on the channel and talk about dualism? Let's do that. Let's get somebody on the channel to talk about dualism. I think it'd be cool. I have a very deflationary view about metaphysics. So I'm not going to endorse physicalism or dualism or idealism or any of these views. I'm an empiricist. I'm a pragmatist. And so would I say thoughts are physical? If you could get real clear about what you mean by that, I might say that. I'm certainly going to think that when I talk about the kind of thoughts I have, I think that those thoughts are the product of or are reducible to descriptions of the physiological activity in my nervous system. And so I'd say, yeah, I think that they're physical in that respect. But I don't think I'd be committed to this like super distinctive metaphysical account of what it means for something to be physical as opposed to not physical. I think that there's problems with giving a clear account of what it would even mean for something to be physical. And so if I said that they were physical, I'd mean that in a pretty deflated sense. Like I would say the activity is a description of the function of a certain physiological system, and that thoughts are physical in the same way that what's happening in my computer is physical. So that's how I would view it. But if somebody wanted to press on that and say, okay, but what does it really mean to distinguish a physical thing from a non-physical thing? I think I would just be like, nah, I'm really kind of a quietist about that. I don't think there is a good distinction between physical and non-physical. So I really wouldn't end up defending something like that. But I might say it's physical as in a dialectical context to contrast myself from substance dualists, property dualists, and idealists and stuff, because I certainly don't endorse those positions. So my position on these matters would be closer to something like physicalism, but really I would just say I'm an empiricist, and that ultimately I think that the way in which we characterize what's going on when it comes to thinking or brains should be fundamentally grounded in perceptions of the world and whatever philosophical systems we build up on the basis of those. That's what I would say. So I'd just be an empiricist about it. I don't really have a very strong commitment one way or another about, well, basically what I would say is I don't think there is some fundamental essences of which things are composed, that things are fundamentally or essentially physical or mental. I don't think anything is any of those things. So I don't really endorse any of those views. So it's a little frustrating to listen to people bandy around questions about whether things are physical or not, when I think that if you really dug into that, it really wouldn't be very clear what's even being talked about.
That there is a material thought?
Oh, what I'm telling you.
Then what the fuck are you talking about?
I'm going to tell you so that you understand. Do you agree with me that if we have no more brains, we have no more thoughts?
Sure.
Okay, great. Then
Okay. Well, what is his view? I doubt he's a physicalist. All right. Jenna says dualist Naima confirmed. I don't think it's been confirmed. It sounds like it though. It sounds like it. Kizzer Gaming says he's kind of a jerk always, but he did get her to argue against her own worldview for over an hour without realizing that she was doing it. I don't know if that's exactly accurate, but I do think that she's been fumbling for a long time here. If this is the conversation you're referring to, I don't know if you're referring to some other conversation. JH says, to be honest, Andrew's a bit slimy to get into these meta whatever debates with someone who has clearly never studied it. Is that slimy? I mean, he's not a professional philosopher either, and she is willing to have the conversation. Why? I don't really know why that would be slimy. Hey, Harmonica Luke says the brain warps up plausibly. It might, like, increased blood flow, increased metabolic activity when you think a lot. Does thinking technically increase body temperature a little bit? Does it? It should, right? I don't know. Okay, so like Tommy Blanchard is some neuroscientist just gonna be very upset with me for not knowing the answer to that question. But I don't know the answer to that question. I don't actually know the answer to that question. Something to look up. Okay. I would imagine it does by some marginal amount. I mean, the brain is pretty calorically intensive. Is that relevant? Because, you know, there's this myth that, like, if you think a whole lot, you're like going to burn a ton of calories. I don't think that that's true. So, like, the baseline of how much calories your brain requires is pretty high, but I don't think there's a whole lot of variation in how much resources it draws on depending on how you use it. And this is why certain things like ego depletion, like a proposed mechanism, which would be like reduction in blood glucose, don't really make a whole lot of sense because just physiologically, you're not going to be draining yourself as much as you might suppose. Okay, JH says, I can get in the channel talk about dualism, but it would be bad and convince nobody. Well, that could be fun. Ether Spark says you should get Brandon Rickabaugh on. Who is that? I don't know who that is. JH says Andrew Wilson is totally allergic to talking about prescriptive morality, instead wanting to stick to arguing about definitions until the person he's talking with slips up. Well, if you're talking to people that aren't very clear, it's hard to move past that. I don't know if people have more familiarity with him, but if people do give clear definitions, does he move on and have substantive discussions about the topics? Because if so, then maybe the problem is he's talking to a lot of people that aren't very clear. JH implies possibly otherwise, maybe, by saying he's been doing that for like 5 years. But it's hard to judge. I mean, if I'm constantly talking to people that aren't very clear, I might get into the habit of trying to get super clear myself. So I could see that. I could also see a person doing it as a reason to, as a sort of comfortable conversational strategy for taking people down, is to just focus on a territory you're comfortable with. I don't know. Analytic philosophy 69. How did you get that as a username? Okay. Points for that. You get 100 Lance Loot just for that name. More Lance Loot. Bam. Sprinkle it on you. It's funny. I don't know why that really got to me. It's because I saw analytic philosophy. I pull it up. I just start reading it. And then wasn't expecting a 69 at the end of it. So that's why it got me. You got me. All right. Someone should be Continental Philosophy 420. I think that would be very appropriate. Okay. Can you react to Pisco debating metaethics? I can post it in Discord if you want to. I want to see what you think he can improve on. I can't guarantee I'm going to do it on the channel. I could listen to it and make an initial sort of assessment of whether I would review the video or not, because let me look at what's in my queue. Oh, holy shit. Okay. I have 31 videos in my queue. So probably not. We'll see. If it really catches me, then I might. Swag says, I feel like a lot of non-philosophers that say consciousness emerges from brains implicitly have strong emergentist conceptions of it, and may be wrong though. Right. And so you could have people that are some type of of like non-reductive physicalist or something like that. It's pretty popular for physicalists themselves to be non-reductive, like among philosophers. So she might have a view like that. It's really hard to say. It could be that the view is too inchoate, it's too underdeveloped. Maybe she's a non-reductive physicalist. Maybe she's some type of dualist of some kind. Who knows? Andrew Moy says maybe her normative critique of Wilson's view, and he flipped it around and is asking about her meta-ethical views. Bottom line is I just want people that have meta-ethical views to be better at defending them. Unless they're non-naturalist realists, we could leave them to the wolves. I'm kidding. If someone wanted help, I'd try to help them out. I hope so. Maybe I'd be a big jerk. I don't know.
That means is that you're appealing to something material for thought. Okay.
But thought is still immaterial. Okay, well, it doesn't negate
hang on. The trick here is to understand that when I say objective, right?
Sure.
It means it doesn't depend on a mind. When I say subjective, it means it does depend. Okay. Hang on. I want you to be very clear.
Sure.
It means that it does. So when I say, where do rights come from? You say rights are objective. That means they exist somewhere outside of minds. So can you tell me where?
No, I'm not saying that objectivity needs to exist.
Maybe I missed something.
Where do rights come from? You say rights are objective. That means they exist somewhere outside of minds. So can you tell me where?
No, I'm not saying that objectivity needs to exist physically. I think that things can be objective without existing physically. But
because right now I'm just trying to.
So I think she should ask him, do you agree that something can exist objectively, not be something can exist objectively outside the mind and not be physical? That's what I would ask. And see what he has to say about it. But if he could just say, no, I want to know what you think. But if she just said, yeah, I think it could be objectively true that something exists or is true and is not in the mind and is not physical. That's like, I don't even endorse, well, I'm not a physicalist, but I don't really have a problem with that. And if he had a problem with that, I'd want to know what the problem is.
Figure out what the terms are for rights themselves so we don't equivocate.
Do you not know what rights are?
I don't know what you think they are. What are they?
I just told you.
Well, you just told me that they're objective, but then you don't give me any grounding for them.
Certain rights are objective.
Okay, yes. Where did then
they are objective and grounded in human morality, which can be based on a God, as you do, or which can be based on our conception of natural law.
Does human morality require a mind?
Sure, Andrew.
Well, then it can't be objective.
Yes.
She's not tracking here. So she says it's objective. He's already said what I mean by that is that it's not dependent on a mind. And then she's just.
It can.
It's almost like she's just responding to his tone. Like he's like, yeah, it's objective. Oh, right. Well, does it depend on a mind? Yes. Well, if you say it's objective, then it doesn't depend on a mind. That's just what the terms mean in this context. So I'd be pretty frustrated at that point. Espen says, Naima came into this debate expecting a surface level discussion about applied ethics, but Andrew shifted the conversation to meta-ethics to take advantage of her philosophical illiteracy. Okay, so let's suppose that that's true. Let's suppose that he were doing that. Now, if that were the case, what you could do at that point, let's say you get in a conversation, you're not prepared for meta-ethics, then you need to get out of that somehow. And you could get out of that by saying something like, I don't really want to have a discussion about metaethics, or I don't know. I don't know exactly what the best approach would be to shift the conversation towards a direction you want to, but it could be pretty tricky if someone is pushing you into a corner and pressing you on a particular topic. You might be forced to just say, I don't really have a good understanding of that particular topic, and then try to move back to other things. So, there's lots of people that do normative and applied ethics that I think it would be, even if they're philosophers, might say, look, I'm not a specialist in metaethics. I don't have a good way of answering those questions. So you could press me on them, and I'm going to say, I don't know a bunch of times until we can go back to some other topic. You might look bad if you do that. So if you have ideas on a better way of taking the conversation to a topic you're comfortable with, let me know in the comments here, or after the video if you're watching this later, which is most of you. Olfa says, I really dislike his condescending tone, though. I agree. I don't like when people talk in a condescending tone, and I do think he's being. I don't think he needs to be condescending like that. like the tone. I don't think the tone needs to be that way, whether he's intending to be condescending or not. I think the conversation would benefit from both of them being more neutral in their tone. Good old Tom says, would be interesting to see him debate someone who just says rights aren't real. Maybe he has before. I'd have to find some more metaethics discussions that he's had. I haven't seen him debate anybody that I think did well on metaethics. Yes, Andrew Moy says, yeah, I think she's not well versed enough in metaethics to realize that they've departed from the first order debate. I think that might be true. Hey, Armadica Luke says, metaethical indeterminism, is that what we call it when people haven't got a persistent view yet? Yeah. And to my knowledge, the term was the coin. I was going to say the coin was termed. The term was coined by Michael Gill in 2009 paper, Indeterminacy and Variability in Metaethics. Sapir says, why is it that he should get to dictate what objective has to mean? He's offering a definition. If she doesn't agree, she could offer an alternative definition, although the definition he offered isn't particularly idiosyncratic as far as metaethics goes. I get that if she means something different, that she should clarify, but something seems weird about how he's telling her that. Is it? I don't find it that weird in this conversational context. Joseph Romano says he has. Nobody's been able to explain a right that is objective and not based on preference. Yeah, but has he talked to any like skilled, like maybe he should talk to Matthew, like Bentham's wait, well, he's a theist, but I don't know if he's not going to ground moral realism in God. But it would be cool to see him talk to a professional philosopher or someone that's more versed in metaethics. Okay, I lost track of where they were at. And I think I'm going to wrap this up in about 5 minutes. We'll have to do another round of this.
Which rights?
Oh, so we don't equivocate.
Do you not know what rights are?
I don't know what you think they are. What are they?
I just told you.
Well, you just told me that they're objective, but then you don't give me any grounding for them.
Certain rights are objective.
Well, okay,
yes.
where did then
they are objective and grounded in human morality, which can be based on a God, as you do, or which can be based on our conception of natural law.
Does human morality require a mind?
Sure, Andrew.
Well, then it can't be objective.
Yes, it can, because objective things can be immaterial. You don't know what objective means.
No. She's confused here.
You're using one definition you found. Can you repeat the definition that you...
There is a sub-definition too, not dependent on the mind for existence. Actual, I'll repeat hers though.
Will you stop
of a person...
deep-throating the mic? Andrew, stop doing this to your face.
You're coping so bad. You're so dumb. Yeah, you know, I can't believe you did this so bad. Oh, go ahead.
Of a person or their judgment, not influenced by personal feelings or...
You shouldn't gloat like that. Come on. Maybe I would if I were in a frustrating conversation, but I think it's something you should try to abstain from. But different people have different attitudes on how to have conversations like these. Some people want more blood sport type stuff in their conversations. Not that this is super blood sporty, but I don't know.
Opinions and considering and representing facts. Also, Andrew, did you want me to look up something?
I got so distracted by
of a person or their judgment, not influenced by personal feelings or opinions, and considering and representing facts. Also, Andrew, did you want me to look up something, or?
I just want to know if rights are objective and they don't depend on minds. Can you please tell me where I could find them?
Andrew, how could you there are things that exist that are not physical.
I'm not talking about whatever you think exists. It's not physical.
There is no limited number of rights.
I just want to know about rights right now. Just rights.
It's immaterial. Do you understand that? It's a concept. Do you know what a concept is?
Do concepts require minds?
Sure, Andrew. Then rights exist in your mind.
Then where's it? So then they're not objective.
But something can exist in your mind.
So here, Andrew, I think slipped up. Do concepts require minds? So the way in which concepts require minds is not the sense in which subjective is normally used in metaethics. So there's a distinction to be made here. So one is, what is it that makes a proposition true? Is it made true by minds or not? And this works like this. So if you take a claim like stealing for personal benefit is wrong. So there's your claim, stealing for personal benefit is wrong. Is that made true by my preference towards it. So like if I have an opposition towards, if I morally disapprove of stealing for personal gain, is that dispreference what makes it true that the statement, sorry, I'm fucking this up. Okay, so you take a statement, stealing for personal gain is wrong. Okay, if that statement is true, you have the question, what is it that makes the statement true? Is it a preference? So for instance, it could be that when I say stealing for personal gain is wrong, what I mean is I disapprove of, or I prefer that people not, I disapprove of stealing for personal gain, or I disapprove of people stealing for personal gain. Well, those sentences are true. And if that's just what I mean when I say stealing for personal gain is wrong, then it is the attitude, it's reducible to, or just a description of my preferences. Those preferences are what make the statement true. The statement has an implicit index to my standards. What that means is if I say stealing for personal gain is wrong, I'm saying something like, I consider stealing for personal gain to be wrong. It's just not explicit. And then that statement would be true because my considerations are what make it true. That's what's meant by subjective in the relevant sense. In the sense of it being dependent on a mind, it means that what serves as a truth maker for the claim is a preference, which requires a mind. Now, that's different from minds being required for something to be instantiated. That's a different type of grounding. Searle draws a distinction here. I don't really like the language that he uses because he says ontological and epistemological, and it's very confusing. So I won't get into that. But someone could say, for instance, happiness requires a mind. You can't be happy unless you have a mind in order to be happy. That's a different type of dependence. That's not a dependence in terms of truth making. It's a dependence in terms of a kind of metaphysical relation where one thing is necessary for the other thing to occur. And it looks like Andrew is mixing up two different senses of mind dependence there. All right, let's see some comments here. Gabriel Chappell says, love the content, Lance. We talked in the comments about Alex O'Connor defending emotivism, and I tried to find him defending the view, but couldn't really find anything. Hasn't he talked about it recently? But yeah, I haven't seen any substantive defense of emotivism from him. Recently, someone posted an extended defense of emotivism on Substack. Emotivism, just so everybody knows, I've never met a philosopher that endorses it. It doesn't mean there aren't any, but very few philosophers these days endorse what you could call the traditional non-cognitivist positions, which would be emotivism, and then something that would mostly associated with A.J. Ayer, and then universal prescriptivism, which is associated with R.M. Hare, which it's got a couple extra features, but what's distinctive about it is that it cashes out the moral claims in terms of them being imperatives. So, Ayer would treat like murder is wrong as murder boo, and then Hare very crudely would treat it as something like nobody murder, something like that, or don't murder. Nobody murder might be better, but these positions are a little more complicated than those characterizations. Those are kind of the intro textbook caricatures, which isn't to say that they're worthless, because they actually say similar kinds of stuff themselves. Especially Ayer has said stuff like that. But these positions often have a philosophical context in which they were originally formulated that make more sense of them in that context. Again, it's not to say that they're defensible, but very few philosophers endorse those these days. Very few philosophers even call themselves non-cognitivists. The sort of a offspring of non-cognitivism is called expressivism, and you can kind of use the terms interchangeably. But contemporary expressivists often think that many of the features that non-cognitivists kind of downplayed are too integral to the way that people ordinarily speak and think, and you can't really do without them that readily. And so they are a lot more concessive. They're a lot more conciliatory towards the characterization of ordinary discourse that realists offer. And then they try to accommodate a lot of those features. And they often do so by augmenting their semantic theses with various other theses, projectivism and a variety of other theses. So the contemporary accounts of expressivism, quasi-realism, and some related positions are far more complicated and far closer functionally, and it maybe in some ways philosophically, to realism than those early accounts. It's puzzling that Alex would go for like the crudest and most primitive form, which isn't necessarily to say it's wrong. I do think it's wrong, but I do think the reasons why people think it's wrong are often lazy and poorly articulated. But I don't know why he holds that view. Anyway, just exactly isn't a preference. We don't all agree on what is appropriate and when. Okay, I don't know what the context for that is. Maybe it was something I was saying. I don't agree with the way he acts either, but I will tell you his explanation. He believes that the worldview has to be destroyed before a person abandons it. Okay. And because it says I don't agree, you catch more bees with honey. Is that what you're saying? I generally agree. Esmond says, I'm confused about what non-cognitivists actually argue for. Are they making a descriptive claim about how people use moral language or something else? It'd be too much of a digression to get into that. The answer is it's complicated and sort of yes, sort of no. And that's tough for me to handle here. I don't feel like I'll be able to review the video and address that. So I'm going to not address that for now. They might say something like there are some superficial features, especially the sort of the structural features of the way that people speak that appear superficially to look like and function like propositions, but that ultimately the sort of functional role of moral discourse is to express or to say non-propositional things. So how people use moral language. Yeah, I would say that they think people use moral language to express non-cognitive stuff, but a lot of the contemporary, so in other words, they would say that they do not use moral claims primarily to express propositions, but contemporary expressivist accounts often actually allow for people to say things like that's true, and then and for it to be, they would allow for moral claims to be true in a certain kind. But and that's because you could graft the position to some deflationary view of truth, or a variety of other ways that you can kind of finesse having some of the features of realism functionally while still calling yourself some type of expressivist. I don't think this is the place to get into that. It would be too much. And, you know, part of it is it's frustrating because you're asking, are they making a descriptive claim? Well, philosophers. Okay, so fuck it. I guess I'm going to say a bit about this. Fuck it. Whatever. I get sucked into this. So philosophers sometimes make this distinction. In fact, they frequently make a distinction in practice, if not explicitly, between claims about what people believe or are committed to, or psychological descriptions of what they take themselves to be saying, and then the semantics independent of what people take themselves to be saying. So they might say, okay, well, we're interested in what the sentences mean, independent of communicative intent or the psychological states of the agents in question. I've frequently quoted this passage from, in fact, let's just do it again. All right. It's a passage from this article. It's a great article. You should read it. It's called Mixed Up Metaethics from Walterson and Armstrong. And I will go to the part. Here it is. Already got it. Here's the relevant passage. So here's what he says. And notice that this is in the context of the dispute between realism and expressivism. And I don't ordinarily read the preceding paragraph, but I will. So he says, finally, I need to clarify the purpose of realism and expressivism. Some metaethicists try to reform or regularize. Let me start over. Finally, let me get a drink. All right. Finally, I need to clarify the purpose of realism and expressivism. Some metaethicists try to reform or regularize moral language, or even to prescribe a new way to talk. This enterprise can be useful. However, the central goal for most moral realists and expressivists is only to describe actual human thought and talk. So, to answer your question, when you say, are they making a descriptive claim about how people use moral language? There is a sense in which the answer is yes, but with a caveat. Listen to the next paragraph. There are two ways to describe moral language. An internal project seeks to capture the psychological processes or representations that actually occur when people use moral language. However, contemporary realists and expressivists are not trying to do that. When Jackson and Petit use networks of truisms, or when Gibbard cites hyperstates, they surely know that these theoretical constructions do not reflect actual psychological entities or events. Instead, they want their theories to be externally adequate in capturing the outputs of our linguistic systems without necessarily reflecting the internal workings of that system. In this respect, the project is more like Chomsky and grammar, which uses constructs without claiming psychological reality. And he goes on to say that it's the former project that he's concerned with. Now, note what's strange about that. The central goal for most realists is to describe actual human thought and talk. And then he turns around and says, because look at this last part, after I gave that distinction, the internal project and the external project. The internal project tries to capture the actual psychological states. The external project doesn't. Look what he says. Overall, then, I take moral realism and expressivism to be trying to externally describe the semantics of all standard moral language. At least that's the debate I want to discuss. The external debate isn't trying to capture actual psychology. So note how strange it is what he says. He says, the central goal for most realists and expressivists is only to describe actual human thought and talk. Then he says there's an internal project that tries to capture human thought and an external project that doesn't. And we're going to focus on the one that doesn't. Well, if it's not trying to, then how is it trying to capture human thought? In other words, hey, so to me, it sounds kind of like this. Realists and expressivists are trying to describe human psychology. There are two projects when it comes to moral language, one that does describe human psychology and one that doesn't. We're going to focus on the one that doesn't. Well, then how the hell are they describing human psychology? So if you're puzzled by this, you should be. What is that? So they're trying to describe the outputs of our language without trying to figure out what the hell is going on with us psychologically. Why? Now, I think the answer to this lies in a completely unfounded commitment to a Chomskyan view of language, which I think is mostly bogus. And I think that there are alternatives to Chomsky's approach. So there's the approach that I favor, which is from Morton Christensen and Nick Chater. And I think that they have a better view and a more correct view of how to approach language. So check out The Language Game. What's going on there? I've always wanted to reach out to Senator Armstrong and ask him what the heck is going on there. So I find it very puzzling. They seem to want to offer descriptive accounts, but not psychologically accurate ones. I don't know what they take. That's why I said it's a struggle to answer that question, because it's not clear to me. And, I did ask a bunch of philosophers once, and I got about a 50-50 split in whether what metaethicists are up to is making descriptive claims or not, or empirical claims. I think I've asked if they're making empirical claims. All right, we're not going to get too much into the expressivism stuff, or should we? Whatever. I'll post this here, and then I probably got to wrap up the video. It's getting too long. Dan Testic says, my main problem with the most expressivists is that they tend to insist on not casting the theory as global semantic thesis, and also one about an ill-defined class of moral statements. Yeah, I'm pretty sympathetic to that. Should we wrap things up there? I don't know how much longer this conversation goes on between them, and I guess we might have to do a part 2. Does anyone know? Let's see if they wrap this up. I really don't know.
Mind and still.
But are we talking about something, or are we talking about rights?
So do you not think that people have an objective right to life?
Listen,
like, what are you arguing?
Right now, I'm just trying to get to
one at a time, please.
Can I
One at a
just
time.
Go ahead.
You're
Go ahead,
arguing
and then
on
Andrew,
a
you respond.
definition because you don't want or opinion.
Why would I ever in a million years be required to defend rights if you can't even fucking tell me what they are?
I just did.
Yeah,
8
but
times.
but I just pointed out all the incoherency with what you just said. It's
No, you
totally
didn't.
incoherent. It's completely incoherent.
Rights are the immaterial concept that humans deserve certain, I wouldn't say benefits, but I guess actually, what is a good word for that? Not benefits.
Entitlements.
Privileges.
Yes, I'll take entitlements. I like that one.
Got it. And they're subjective. They're not objective.
So do you not believe that anyone has any
It's not.
rights?
I'm asking you to.
I
please
want you
define.
to define a belief. Make a statement.
That's
Andrew.
great. Right now, we're just trying to figure out what rights are. Are they subjective or not?
I think that certain rights are not subjective.
Okay. Can you demonstrate the rights that are not subjective?
I think that rights can be infringed upon, but
Can
I
you
think
tell me
that
the
is
rights that aren't
immoral.
subjective?
I think that the right to life is not subjective.
Okay, someone says this goes on for another 30 minutes at least. Okay, well, then we'll wrap it up there. I've never seen him defend theistic metaethics, always on the offensive. Okay, great. If anyone can find a video where he does defend it, let me know. I've never seen it either, and I would like to see that. Harmonica Luke, I got to get going. All right, everybody, going to wrap it up there. We'll continue this another time. I hope you all had fun. And yeah, take it easy. Take care, everybody. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, check out the description for all the regular links, do all the things. See y'all later.
Bye.